Hey, what is up everybody? Jukem here, back once more to explain the mechanics of Pokkén Tournament DX. Today, we'll be breaking down height properties, a simple mechanic that plays a big factor in every Pokken match. This might explain to newer players situations they've had where attacks just phase through the opponent, but don't worry, it all makes sense. This is Pokemon, of course, so it's going to attract a lot of people who might not have played fighting games before. But then again, Pokken in particular takes it a step further with very unique height properties. What I will explain applies exactly the same to both Field and Duel Phase, but do note not every attack of a certain input, such as 5Y, won't be the same height across the entire cast. The reason I say this is because I will be giving examples of what height certain moves are commonly found on. Starting from the ground up, we have ground-only moves. As the name implies, these are only landing on opponents who are grounded. No matter how hard you try, no matter how close they are, they will never be hit by these attacks if they're in the air. You'll notice this mainly from every character's standard grab, as well as some command grabs, but there are attacks that possess this state too. You could think of ground-only moves as mainly for mix-ups considering they are mostly found on grabs. And while on the topic, air-only moves also exist. These are even rarer than ground-only moves, but as you can tell, if the opponent isn't off the ground, they aren't being hit by these attacks, which arguably makes them harder to hit. Usually, these are used in air combos, but depending on the attack, could be part of a neat call-out or reaction to jumps. With those two unusual heights gone over, let's now talk about the main 5 heights of Pokken. Starting from the ground up, but not as literally this time, is low attacks. Typically, these match the name of the height, hitting low to the ground. Attacks with this property tend to be quick pokes or powerful combo starters or knockdown tools. 2Y and 2X attacks in Duel Phase are the biggest examples of common low attacks for the entire cast. What makes this a weakness is that the player on the receiving end of a low is able to jump the attack on frame 1. No matter the point within the move, lows will never connect if one just jumps. This includes Oki being similar to grabs and other ground-only moves. But the difference between low and ground-only attacks is that lows are actually capable of hitting airborne opponents, but this is mostly for combos. You could see this as a necessary weakness for how good many 2Ys and 2Xs are. It should be mentioned that the only difference between an opponent being airborne and them having low immunity is for cases where air-only moves would connect and Rotom activating. Airborne opponents are also usually knocked down or have an air tech situation since they're in the air and not on the ground. Next up is the most common height property in Pokken, mid-lows. These are used for many grounded inputs when not holding down or up, like 5Ys, 6Ys, and 4Ys, as well as their equivalent strong attacks. These have an average vertical range, making them able to hit airborne opponents about to land much better than lows. While usually slower than lows, they're reliable nonetheless. Opponents can jump these attacks on frame 5, so they're capable of being used on Oki with more ease than lows, though they aren't invincible of course if the opponent jumps at the right time. Immunities to mid-lows are also much less common, though 8Xs on certain characters possess this property. In the median of heights is the median representative itself, mids. The universal homing attack found in Field Phase is a common example of a mid. This is the best height for an attack to be in Pokken. Remember, Pokken doesn't have high or low shenanigans. It's simply a guard that protects the character from everything. So with that in mind, unlike every other height, there are no immunities to mids. They are effective attacks that will simply catch opponents jumping up if they're in the hitbox, while impossible for anti-airs to beat out too. Essentially, the only way to avoid a mid is to just be out of its range. Attacks that are mids are usually reliable, but are also rare to have compared to every other height. They might have some wind up depending on the attack as well, but there is not much else to say besides a mid a day keeps the opponents in disarray. On up to the second highest of highs is mid-highs. Probably a confusing way of putting it, but mid-highs are mostly found on aerial attacks. With quite a few exceptions of course, pretty much all aerial, weak, and strong attacks are classified as a mid-high. 8Xs also fall into this category. Mid-high is a pretty great height that isn't a true mid, since you will hit opponents trying to jump, just like a mid. The downside is this is also the height that is frequently anti-aired the most, since 8Y, the universal anti-air button, has mid-high and high immunities. Low profiling opponents via stances at the very least won't be able to dodge mid-highs, but jumping in continuously will get you anti-aired over and over again. Another notable weakness these share are slower startups. Many 8Xs aren't the quickest while you have to be in the air to use your attacks, but jump-ins or retreating aerial attacks are still as common as you'd think for many characters. Like I said, not a bad height to be, especially if you're a grounded mid-high that has pretty fast startup. Last for the normal heights is highs. These essentially function like mid-highs, but with one glaring weakness. More moves have high immunity compared to mid-highs and can simply be ducked by many characters' low stances. Even for characters without this trait in their low stance, almost all 2Ys and every single 2X in the game has high immunity. Good time to also mention that mid-low invulnerability will also avoid normal lows, and the same applies for moves with mid-high invulnerability being immune to also highs. Basically, there are universal options to dealing with highs, but at the same time, high attacks are on a lot more grounded attacks compared to mid-highs. Many characters' 8Ys are counted as high attacks. And of course, being a high-hitting attack, this will also catch jumps just like every other height that isn't a low. But yeah, that's pretty much all the basic heights of what's this? A special mid? Ooh, that sounds fun! Oh, that's weird. So special mids are like if you took a normal mid and were developing mid-lows and mid-highs at the same time on an attack. In easier speech, you can jump these attacks on frame 5 like a mid-low and anti-air them like a mid-high. It's really weird, and what's even more weird is that a ton of projectiles possess this property. Jumping over projectiles makes sense, but most of the time, characters trying to use mid-high invul to pass through projectiles will get hit anyway since it doesn't last very long. It also depends on how fast the projectile even is passing through the character. Of course, there are non-projectile special mids, so the mid-high immunity is pretty good for those moves. I personally think it's fun and unique to have a height like this, but this can be mind-boggling to hear for newer players, as it really doesn't make much sense if you think about it, but now you know how hard it is to anti-air a disjointed full screen projectile, so there you go. The last topic I want to bring up is oddities for certain attacks, which breaks the Pokken formula that I just explained to you. Machamp's 2Y seems to be your average frame 11 mid at first, but what if I told you it wasn't a mid? It isn't a special mid either. You can't jump or anti-air it. The truth is that it's simultaneously a low and a high. And I don't mean multi-hits with separate hitboxes. This is a single hitting attack. What does this mean? It's basically a mid. There is one practical situation in abusing this fact, which comes in the form of Aegislash, whose low stance avoids both lows and highs. Nothing else, just this situation. You can imagine how long it took Pokken players to realize this about Machamp's 2Y when Aegislash was DLC in DX in the year 2018. But anyway, if we're talking about Aegislash, the last oddities I want to talk about come from him in the form of Flash Cannon and Sacred Sword's Mist Explosion. These are both mid-lows, so they can't be low-stanced. But there is someone who's different. Due to the hitboxes not reaching that low apparently, combined with Gengar melting way down into the ground, these actually whiff on his low stance. This is pretty practical in the matchup too, but it's funny how an error like this occurred. There are probably a few other attack height oddities, but those two are the ones I want to talk about the most in this video. Hope you all enjoyed the video and realized why Sceptile is jumping all of your mid-low attacks. Subscribe for more Pokken if you so wish, of course, and I'll see you guys next time for Pokken guides, sets, and more.